أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت السميع العليم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحاب سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم عليه رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. This is our first session in this series, and there could have been a lot of topics that we could have covered. We could have, these are going to be a half-hour sessions. So whatever survey we do, whatever topic we talk about, isn't going to be very extensive unless we focus on something very, very specific. And in time, inshallah, if Allah so wills, we will do that. But the first few sessions are going to be quite broad in their scope, because I wanted to do in the beginning was to set the stage for what we ultimately want to do. And what we ultimately want to do is to establish uh, our own identities in our own minds. We should be able to realize who we are as brothers and fathers and sons and husbands, and ultimately as ummati of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And the person and each individual, each one of us is is a person Allah Rabbul Izzat has specific plans for. We should ultimately be able to understand that, not just understand that, but also feel that and then act accordingly. Uh, After having completed my ONA levels, I went to LAMS, um, which is Alhamdulillah the most prestigious university in Pakistan. And I went there to study economics. When I reached LAMS, I came across philosophy and sociology and literature, so many different strands of thought that I ended up not studying economics at all, which actually, and I thank Allah for that, because what we used to study there as part of economics was textbook classical and neoclassical economics, micro and macroeconomics, which probably quite a few of you would have done too. What goes amiss there, what they don't tell us when we're studying basic level micro and macroeconomics, is that economics is has always been a political tool. So by studying philosophy, actually, I ended up learning much more about economics than I would have had I studied economics directly. But it was in my second or third semester over there, in the first year, second or third semester, when we met Mufti Kamaluddin Ahmad Sahab. And he very, he was very distressed, if I may, very sad, and a bit frustrated and angry also. And he remarked that when I see you and 20, 21, 22-year-olds, men and women, uh, hardly boys and girls, they're actually men and women, basically very capable of everything. When I see you walking around the campus, when I see you interact with each other, the way you talk, the way your hands move, the way you deliver your punchlines, your one-liners, the way you laugh, what you talk about, the way you dress, and what you dress yourselves with, what you cover your bodies with. It's as if for the past 1400 years, no one has ever had the opportunity or the willingness. No one in the past for 1400 years has ever bothered to think about you, to make decisions about you, to write for you what life is and how it should be led. It's as if you're orphans. No one has ever thought about you at all. Because, and this is what he said, because when I look at you, I don't see Muslims, I don't see Pakistanis, I don't see 20, 21, 22 year olds with uh, limitless potential. I see people who act as if someone in the US is writing their lives for them, is scripting their lives for them. It's when I see you, it's as if I see popular characters from popular sitcoms on American television. What you do isn't you. The way you act, the way you behave, the way you dress up. Islam is not reflected at all. Now we accepted what he said. We accepted for two or three reasons. One of them being he was an alim, he was a mufti, he was a sheikh, and we gave him enough. We just accepted what he said. We also accept we Another reason why we accepted what he said was because he made his way to Pakistan to study ilm of the deen, different actually ulum, different disciplines of religious knowledge. He made his way to Pakistan from the US. He was born and raised there. He came from a very good family. He came from a successful family. He came from um, uh, he had been enrolled in the best universities in the US, in the University of Chicago. So when he says, when I look at you, I don't see Muslims or Pakistanis. I see popular characters from popular American sitcoms. We accepted what he said. And this struck us. And this, specifically for me, this stayed with me and this still informs me. And this got me thinking. For the for the for the past 6 or 7 years, I have personally seen this in myself and the people around me. That when we say we've made a decision, when we say this is me, this is representative of me, the way I act, the way I think, the way I decide, the different factors I weigh and counterweigh and consider before making a decision. When there is a eureka moment, when I'm suddenly jubilant and happy because I've uh, understood something profound, all of that and much more actually, all of that, actually none of that is me. All of that is someone else, and that someone or something else is actually culture. The culture that I have been internalized in, uh, the culture that I've been socialized in. And what is distressing about this is that this actually is not Pakistani culture at all. And I'm here in Pakistan. I'm a Pakistani. I'm a Karachiite. This is Fajr time here. Could you please mute on your end? Jazakallah. Uh, Back in university, we used to talk about globalization. Then we stopped talking about this. But in globalization, what we actually usually talked about was how the World Trade Organization and the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and NATO and different agencies, how they're responsible, wittingly or unwittingly, of eradicating cultural boundaries of bringing people together, the world becoming global village. Now, these globalization, global village, being a member of the world, and there was such a thing. This was actually a big movement 20 or 25 years ago, even before that. So these were topics in vogue. People used to talk about these things. We don't talk about these things. And now that we've stopped talking about globalization, we have stopped realizing that the most insidious and the most telling blow globalization has left on us is not on economics or financial structures, but on our frameworks of thought, the way we think. These are not uh, the framework which comes naturally to me is not Pakistani or Islamic anymore. It's someone else's. And I'd like to give you a few examples. Had this been a classroom session, I would have written these next few sentences on the board or given you these on a piece of paper and would have asked you to think about it, think about whether you use these terms and do you think said those terms. I'll share these on our WhatsApp group also. But we use the term national interest. We use it. Our parents used it. Our friends use it. Um, where we work, where we study, everyone there uses this term, national interest. Our politicians use this term, national interest. Our talk show hosts, all of us use this term. We don't realize where this term comes from. This is from 1500s Italy, Machiavelli. A very strange, a very peculiar sort of a person, a very, very deep thinker, but someone, but yeah, interestingly, Islam has never produced a Machiavelli, and there's good reason for that. We might discuss Machiavelli in detail in some future lecture, but the important thing to realize now, right now, is that the term national interest, which we use, as if we've thought of this, we've internalized this term to such an extent that we never questioned where this term is actually coming from. This comes from 1500s Italy, from Machiavelli. Similarly, we use the term knowledge is power, and we never stop to think about where this term came from. Knowledge is power was uttered by Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon is a personality which is most closely related to European Enlightenment. European Enlightenment being one of the fruits of European Enlightenment being um, Judeo-Christian Europe's movement away from Judeo-Christian values. This guy was a polymath. He was a philosopher. He was a scientist. He was a mathematician. He was many things, and he was fed up, like many other people in this era. This is 1561 to 1626, the middle of the 16th century or the end of 16th century. This is one of the people, very, very learned, very smart, very intelligent, and very, very discontented with uh, the official Christian church. And when we use the term knowledge is power, we're using the terms of a person who is one of the most, one of the people primarily associated with um, Europe's movement away from Christianity. When we use the term knowledge is power, we should realize that. Similar is the case with the term state of nature. State of nature, this is Thomas Hobbes, 1588 onwards, England. Again, we use this term, state of nature. We do not realize where this is coming from. We use these terms as if we came up with these. Now we understand when we're put to the test, we'll never say we came up with these. We understand that, and we wouldn't want to lie. There's no need to lie. But when we use these terms, when we use the term social contract, the use of this term is ubiquitous. This is everywhere. Social contract. We do not know what this really means. We know roughly what this means, and the extent of our knowledge is usually enough for the purposes we need this term for. But what we do not realize is that this was John Locke in 1632 onwards. Well, this is around 1660, 1670, England. These two people, Thomas Hobbes and John Locke, are two critical figures in developing the British philosophical, the English philosophical tradition, and the effect they've had uh, on politics of Great Britain, mid 17th century, late 17th century, are extremely important to all of us, because I include myself in this because I'm in Pakistan, part of the Commonwealth, and I'm assuming most, if not all, of the audience here in this session is in Canada. Canada is also part of the Commonwealth. Being part of the Commonwealth means we are, to some extent, influenced by British policies. All of us flew our national flags at half mast 2 weeks ago when the Queen of England died. She passed away. And that political structure is heavily influenced by Thomas Hobbes and John Locke. Now, we don't realize this. At one level, it's okay if we don't realize this because this has no direct manifestation, no direct bearing on our lives. On another level, it is criminal that we do not realize this because what we say and what we do is shaped by these thoughts. Social contract, the state of nature, and freedom of speech. Now, this is a mantra, especially for the West, increasingly for people for areas like Pakistan and India. Freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, life, and liberty. This is effectively the slogan of modern day France. Now, who said that? This was said by a French philosopher who was born in the 1700s, Voltaire, one of the most seminal, most important thinkers for French Enlightenment, not just European Enlightenment, but French Enlightenment. And again, the list goes on. Public and private sphere, we use this term. This was by John Stuart Mill. John Stuart Mill's harm principle is what our society's constitutions are effectively based on. Civil disobedience, we know Gandhi did that. We know Ghaffar Khan of Balochistan, sorry, of Northwest Frontier Province, the modern day Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. He did that. And uh, concurrent to them, there's a much more famous person for you, especially Martin Luther, the the African American led civil disobedience movement in the United States of America. Civil disobedience. This concept was popularized and theorized effectively by Thoreau, 1817. Free market, another term we use, Adam Smith. Now, this goes on. What I want to do essentially in this very first lecture of ours was when we think we are being original, we are not being original at all. We do not realize what in our society, what in our culture uh, has very silently crept into our framework. When we use the term civil disobedience, when we use the term freedom of expression, uh, and I've used this term, I'm sure you have also, or your children have. We should understand this. We did not come up with this, and since someone else came up with this, the context that these terms were developed and devised in, that context, even though it has gone silent because no one talks about this, this context hasn't gone away, and that affects us. And that affects us not just because we are using these terms, that it affects us because we're using these terms unthinkingly. We do not realize that it is not just American sitcoms that are scripting our lives for us. We should realize that those American sitcoms themselves were based upon very, very fundamental principles of freedom of expression and freedom of religion and liberty and so many good sounding, nice sounding terms. We need to become deliberate. We have to become thinking Muslims. We cannot, uh, uh, we are, as Sheikh Hamza Yusuf says, we are sleepwalking through life. We do not realize who we are. We do not appreciate everything that Allah has done for us, has given us. We do not appreciate uh, everything that our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has done for us. We do not appreciate the millions upon millions upon millions of hours of intense academic and intellectual, academic, intellectual, scholarly, and spiritual activity that has gone into the books that are available to us that we never read. The profound wisdom within them, and because we do not deliberate, because we do not contemplate, because we do not ask these important questions to us, very foundational questions to us: who we are, how we are supposed to act, what are we supposed to be, who are we supposed to be, how are we supposed to act in a given situation, what should be- because we never ask ourselves these questions, the the lens with which we see reality around us, that lens isn't ours anymore. That lens is heavily influenced by Western philosophical traditions. Now, there's nothing inherently, intrinsically wrong with that. And in the next few sessions, inshallah, uh, we'll we'll talk about this, because what I wanted to do in the beginning was to establish that, as I've said this a number of times now, that what we think is us doing this, or thinking that, or deciding upon this, isn't actually us at all. So, the Western philosophical tradition, there's nothing wrong with that. It is just different from what Islam would have us do in a few aspects. And it is those aspects that we need to understand, uh, uh, at least a bit, at least a bit, or we'll sleepwalk through our lives, and very soon we'll hit our 60s and our 70s, and we'll realize that we actually wasted our time away. So there's there's time for us yet, Alhamdulillah. In the next few sessions, we'll very broadly canvas the Western philosophical tradition, and by that I mean a very broad history, a very bird's eye view of historical view of Christianity in Europe specifically, and Christianity's relationship with science. And after that, we'll spend some time on why Christianity's relationship with science is important to us today, and why it has, how actually, not why, but how it has affected the mood of the people living in Western societies. And as I said in the beginning, because we do not talk about globalization anymore, and maybe with good reason, but one of the adverse reactions of not being cognizant of globalization is that we do not realize that Pakistani societies, societies, not just Pakistani, but Indian and Bangladeshi and actually Korean and Japanese, uh, uh, very, very Oriental civilizations are not really very Oriental anymore. We're increasingly becoming one. We're increasingly becoming very, very homogeneous. We're not taking the all the good that the West has on offer, but all the harmful, if I may, or the injurious aspects of culture in the West. At least according, if at least if we view reality from Islamic perspective, if the lens that we have is Imam Ghazali's and not Francis Bacon's, we wouldn't want to incorporate a few uh, very fundamental, very foundational aspects of Western thought. Now, this is important to me uh, because I am a young father, or I'm a father of three very young children. And this is important to me because uh, I see this happening in Pakistan, and the literature that I read, or the people that I listen to. This is very evident that this is happening here also. And this should be very important to you also, because this is your lived reality much more than mine. This will be my lived reality in 10 or 15 years' time completely. And the developments that are happening here in Pakistan and in these adjoining areas is actually very disturbing. But this has already happened where you live. Uh, Atheism goes unchallenged challenged effectively. Their freedom, their severe limits on freedom of expression when it comes to atheism, or about certain political realities, or about certain cultural realities. But we still talk about freedom of expression as if it is a Quranic freedom. It is a good freedom. We should have that. But there have to be limits on freedom of expression. And the West has actually weaponized this. This is a topic for another day, though, and for a slightly mature audience. I don't know how old this audience is. I'll, inshallah, uh, today, inshallah, distribute a short survey so that I can get to know you better, so that I can tailor my these little sessions of ours according to the audience. But again, if you take anything away from this session, is that we need to wake up. We need to understand that we are Muslims, that we are brothers and fathers and sons. I'm assuming there's no sister listening to this. This is supposed to be for boys only, or for men only. So, assuming that, we should realize that uh, we are husbands and fathers and brothers and sons, and then men. We're supposed to act like men, and then we're part of the ummah of the last prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That should mean something. And then part of our identity is that we are people Allah Rabbul Izzat has specific plans for. When Allah Ta'ala created me, Saif, He created me specifically. I'm not part of a batch. I am me. I have a specific identity, and I am supposed to build a very personalized, a very personal, a very intimate relationship with Allah Rabbul Izzat. That is my own. My relationship with Allah is not my sheikhs, is not my teachers, is not my fathers, is not my mothers. It is supposed to be specifically my personal relationship with Allah. We can't afford to sleepwalk through life. We cannot afford to daydream through life. Islam has no conception uh, of teenage, but the West and increasingly our societies consider the years 12, 13 to 19 to be teenage years. And this phase of life is considered to be one where you can experiment and make mistakes. It's okay to experiment, to make mistakes. Islam doesn't think like that. As soon as you hit puberty, as soon as you become an adult, you're supposed to act like an adult. It doesn't mean that you'll be asked to run a family or to run a state or to lead people into battle or to lead the national ice hockey team to a very tense situation. You know, Islam doesn't say that that will happen. What Islam says is that could happen. You should try and be ready for responsibility. Allah Rabbul Izzat has blessed us with so much, and the least we could do is to be cerebral about this, to think about who we are, where we have come from, what will happen to us when this passage of our life uh, passes, recedes into history, when we can't even remember what we used to be like. We should think about these things. And in the next few sessions, inshallah, what I'm going to try and do is to establish that this is a very, very immediate need of ours, and not just some abstract thinking, inshallah. If you've got suggestions, if you think we should talk about something specific in the upcoming session, on the WhatsApp group individually with me if you want to, and I'll tailor my upcoming these sessions, inshallah, as much as I can. May Allah be pleased with all of you and me for our time that we've taken out for His deen, inshallah. And may He make us better Muslims, and may He make us better human beings and better ummatis, inshallah. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه سيدنا أحمد وبارك وسلم عليه. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.